Sharing sound. Should be a good evening of conversation. We welcome our social media, YouTube and Facebook, to our part 2 with General Bill Matz. All right. Let me start the music and we'll let everybody in. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to VBC Scuttlebutt for Monday, April 7th. My name is Sean Hall. I'm the Director of Programming with the VBC. It's great to see you all this evening. I am flying solo tonight as Todd and Glenn are currently in New Orleans visiting the World War II Museum. So we decided tonight was a great night for my part 2 of my conversation with General Bill Matz. He is here with us to continue on with his story. We have a lot.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening, General. Thank you again for being with us.
Well, thank you.
And I'm seeing a lot of familiar faces here in the room. And you heard me probably say part 2. And if you weren't here for part 1, that is okay. I'm going to put into the chat here the part 1. You're welcome to check that out whenever you would like. As we will be going over sort of a quick review of part 1 here, and then diving into part 2. But for those of you who may be new to us, and like I said, I see a lot of familiar faces. It's great to see you, Henry Shepke, Scott Masters, Brad, good to see you, sir. Marilyn, Colin. And for those of you who may be new, the Veterans Breakfast Club. Our mission is creating communities of listening around veterans and their stories to connect, educate, heal, and inspire. And we've been doing it for 16 years. And please visit us on our website, www.veteransbreakfastclub.org, to find out more about us and to connect with us. We would love to connect with you, especially if you're a veteran, as we like to collect these stories. But I know that we have so much to get to because I said I think I have about 3 pages of questions. And that doesn't include questions from, obviously, our audience. So please feel free that during the story tonight, if you have a question that pops in your head, please feel free to put it into the chat. I'll be monitoring that as best I can. If I'm going to be in a different view, if by chance you see somebody waving their hand that they'd like to ask a question, please throw that into the chat as well. Say, hey, Larry's waving his hand. That'll at least alert me that somebody is waving and I just may have missed them. So I want to make sure that everybody gets to say tonight, or everybody can throw in a question if they would like to. So anyway, without further ado, General, as a quick overview of that part 1, most of our audience may not know that you were stricken with polio as a young boy, and that you made a quite a miraculous recovery and able to play football and join the Army in your youth. Is that right?
Yes, right, Sean. I think you covered that really well in the first sequence. Yeah, I was stricken with polio. I was paralyzed from head to toe in 1944, and really, with the grace of God and a lot of luck and the Sister Kenny treatment, I was able to make a miraculous recovery, get out of the braces, and through that Sister Kenny moist hot pack treatment, it reinvigorated my paralyzed leg, got my anterior horn cells bursting again and bursting those muscles out, and I was able to recover and go about doing the things that I was able to do.
And we went over you getting trained with the Army, and the fact that you weren't letting anything keep you back. So you were keeping up with all of the physical activity that the Army put you through. You end up in Vietnam. We had talked at the end of part 1 about December 4th, 1967. You were a captain at the time. You survived an ambush, and also you earned the Silver Star during that battle. I want to bring up sort of the next part. I'm going to jump right into sort of our part two here, and I want to share a picture for everyone here. Can you describe to me what's going on in this picture?
Yeah, that's General Creighton Abrams, who was Comus MacVie, Commander U.S. Forces Vietnam. He had just taken over from Westmoreland, who had been the former commander there, and that's an award ceremony right there down in Dong Tam in Vietnam. That was September of 1968, where he is pinning the Distinguished Service Cross on me.
So that perks my ears up because we just said that you earned the Silver Star not less than almost a little over a month ago, almost 2 months prior to this, and then you earned the Distinguished Service Cross. This was during Tet, and I was wondering if you could take us sort of through the operation that happened that sort of uh, that got you this award or this not award this what would you call it? I guess not a
Well,
this.
yeah, well, let me take you through it, Sean.
Sure.
Yeah, so actually, the Tet Offensive really began in the early morning hours of the 31st of January, 1968. I'm sure there's some folks in the audience that were our Vietnam vets. I know that, and perhaps were over there at the same time. It was a major offensive throughout all Vietnam. They really took us by surprise. Uh, but actually, the Tet Offensive really, in my view, it marked a turning point in the Vietnam War. It eroded public support for the war back here in the U.S., and it led to really a reevaluation of the U.S. strategy and then our eventual withdrawal in January, February, March of 73. But having said that, it was an absolute major defeat at the tactical and operational level of war for the VC and the NVA. I mean, once the American troops got their footing and we realized, hey, that they're attacking across the country, we drove them back tremendously. I can only speak from the Delta, my viewpoint from the Delta. I was a rifle company commander at the time, and they moved us very quickly by boat, Mobile Riverine Force, and they beached us at Mito, which is the provisional capital of Fort Corps. And that had been under siege and attack for hours. They had killed many of the people there and just absolutely razed the city. In fact, one of my lieutenants who's still living today, Keith Might, said it reminded him, or it looked like the burning of Atlanta. But anyway, they put our battalion into Mito to drive the VC out of there, and that was a 2-day fight. Totally different fight from anything we'd been used to before. We've been used to operations where you just plow through the through the Delta on operations, search and destroy operations. But this was city fighting. This was something totally different. The VC were in there very strong. So it was a house-to-house fight. I describe it, I think, very well in a full chapter in my book. But it was house-to-house fighting. You had to get them out of the second floors, out of the first floors. They were able to tunnel in certain areas. They had been stashing equipment there for weeks beforehand. And so it was quite a fight. And we took significant casualties. It was during that battle that I was able to pull 4 of our soldiers out of a very bad hotspot who'd been wounded, couldn't move, and were down between the canal and a heavy rice dike. So as I say, that was about a 2-day fight. The 7th Airborne Division was on one side of the canal. A canal goes right through Mito, and Mito is a fairly large city. It's the provincial capital. The 7th Airborne was on the right, and our brigade battalion was on the left side of the canal. We just swept up, encountered very, very heavy fighting in a cemetery there. Very interesting that the after-action reports that came back from across the country after the war is they found out that the VC and the NVA had been using cemeteries to stash equipment, ammunition, hospital goods, and things like that. They were putting it in grave sites, putting it in the ground where nobody would bother it. So there was a huge grave site there, a cemetery there in Mito, and it took us half a day to get the VC who were entrenched there, get them out of there. We took some casualties on that. But it was very interesting on how they used the cemeteries there prior to the Tet Offensive. So Tet Offensive really, the first 24, 48 hours were the toughest. So by 2 February, we pretty well had them cleaned out of Mito. They put us back on boats and then moved us further south where the fighting was continuing. We continued then down there, moving them out of smaller villages further south in Longan province.
So a good question from Brad here. Were you and your company trained for urban fighting?
We were not. We were not. I had a little training myself, as many officers did back at Benning, for what they call urban or mount training. But when I got to Vietnam in November of '67, no, we received no training for that. As I say, it was all of our operations prior to that were search and destroy operations through the huge expanse of the Mekong Delta, where you're primarily always in the water up to your, at least up to your waist, looking for the VC. So this was all something new to us. And I really, that's a good question. I really point that out in the book. We were on hard stand and it was urban fighting. I think I've got a couple of pictures in there too, Sean, that shows what the Delta fighting was like.
I think I have. Let me double check here. I have these pictures here. I might have just pulled these up just a minute ago. Let me pull them up now. And you said you pulled four of your men out of this battle, and that's how you earned the Distinguished Service Cross.
Yes, right. My company moved up through Delta Company, who had been stalled and couldn't move any, up to the sort of to the front of the battle line, you might say, in the city of Mito. And our B company was on my left, and 4 of their soldiers got shot up and pinned down. And the VC, every time somebody went to get one of them, they were shot up or killed. When I got there, Lieutenant Smith, one of my platoon leaders, his body was there. He had tried to get him out. He was dead. A couple others tried, and I was up there at the head. I knew what had to be done. Somebody said, "Sir, they're down there. They're down there. They need help." Tremendous velocity of small arms fire going on at the time on the left and right, and I threw all my equipment off so I could move quickly, and I got down in between that canal and the dike line where they were, and started pulling them out. So that's essentially what happened there in that particular incident. But some of those pictures you just showed, Sean, gave you an idea of what it was like going through the Mekong Delta.
So I have a question about that. Why didn't you give the order for the men to be pulled out, and why did you decide to do it yourself?
Well, because I got up there, it was almost bedlam. Machine guns were rattling off. It was a small arms fight. On the left were higher buildings where they were shooting from the rooftop, second-story hooches and so forth. I got up there and somebody yelled to me because they knew that my company was moving through D Company, who was sort of pinned down at the back. We totally moved through them. I got up front, so they knew Charlie Company was coming up, and one of the sergeants from the other company who was taking some cover yelled. He said, "Sir, yeah, they're down there." And things happen quickly at something like that. I just wasn't going to fool around anymore. 2 or 3 folks had tried it, and so I went down and got him. I was very lucky. I was hit in the arm with grazing shots, flesh shots. but was very, very lucky to get down there and get them up. And then we turned all of our fire. I brought up my 90s and we turned all of our fire then against the front and against the left side that were hitting us.
Did it ever cross your mind when you were in the act of doing this that you could be killed doing this?
No, it never crossed my mind. I can honestly say I don't. People always ask you that question, and it just never crossed my mind that I would get killed. I just never had time to think about that. The only thing that I thought of, the one thing that bothered me the entire time I was a rifle company commander in Vietnam in the Delta, of which Tet was part of it, was losing a man. I mean, that bothered me more than anything, was losing somebody. I never had time to think about myself. You've got so much to do there. You got really essentially 160 infantrymen there that you're responsible for. So no, that never really crossed my mind. Although I'll say this, years afterward, months afterward, times afterward, even now, sometimes I'm sitting alone, I'll think about it and I'll say, boy, why was I spared? Why was I spared? I came so close to really being hit badly or being killed, but it just didn't happen.
So you said losing one of your men. That sort of flashes us forward only a couple weeks. February 14th in Canton. I've read about your RTO, a young man named Underhill from Tennessee. Can you tell me a bit about him and how you lost him?
Yeah, that was actually, we're still a continuation of the Tet Offensive, really. This was about 13, 14 February. So they moved us then out of Mito and moved us south down the Bassac and Mekong rivers, and we inserted in Canton, which is another large city in the Mekong Delta, obviously further south. That had come under extreme fighting during the Tet Offensive. We went in there and encountered heavy fighting, and it was there that that I lost Underhill. He had just had his 21st birthday. A young kid from Tennessee. He'd been with me since I got there in November, and boy, you talk about that was like losing a right arm. I was laying right next to him when he got hit badly. And my men seemed to think it was a mortar that hit him, but it wasn't. It was a very heavy machine gun fire. And, I described that whole scene. In fact, there's a picture of he and I laying there a day or so before he got hit. That really took it out of me. And in fact, my battalion commander, Colonel Bland, a day or so later, when we got back and we're doing our after action report, he said, Bill, he said, I never heard your voice quiver the entire time you were company commander, except when you lost Underhill and got on the net. So, things like that can hit you. I had a write to his parents afterward, and up until really several years ago, I stayed in touch with the Underhill family there in Tennessee.
What has it meant to you to carry him and his story with you and try to tell people a bit about him all these years later?
Yeah, well, I think in carrying him with me and carrying his story with me, it's I'm carrying the story of my entire company that way. I'm keeping them alive and keeping the thoughts of what happened alive that way. But like I say, losing him really affected me. As most people know, those in the audience, how close a rifle company commander can get to his RTO. Your RTO is your radio telephone operator, usually a Spec 4, PFC, maybe a sergeant that carries your Prick 25 radio, and he's always one or two steps behind you. He was the guy that when I needed fires, I got to him and he called it in, or he got on the battalion net. So it was very tough.
How were you able to refocus after losing Underhill?
Well, I mean, I described the loss. I described the loss in my book here. I mean, the rounds just took his head off, and I was just a foot or so from it. You know, you don't like talking about it, but you're asking the questions, and I mean, my uniform was splattered. It was that bad. Uh, but you know, you just keep moving on. We got a medic right there, obviously. A couple of medics right there got him, but I mean, he was killed instantly, and they got him out. But I didn't stop. I had to keep moving. I had another 150, 160 men, and we had enemy in front of us. So, uh, you know, at the time, I knew what happened. I knew he was dead, but I had to keep going with the mission. And you know, that brings up something here, Sean, that I just want to mention to our audience. One of the most difficult things I had in Vietnam as a company commander is when do you stop the momentum of the fight to get your wounded out? I wrestled with that and wrestled with that. I'm not sure I always made the right decision, but I made a decision. My battalion commander used to get a little bit upset with me. He was sort of in the impression, you get a casualty, you want to get them out as soon as you can. And that 4 December fight on the canal, I didn't do that, because when you do that, you have to stop fighting. You have to clear a clearing out to bring helicopters in. You have to stop your artillery from coming in, or you move it to the side. So you're stopping the momentum of the fighting to get 1 or 2 wounded out. But then again, if you don't get the wounded out, they'll bleed to death. The way I saw most of my men die was we couldn't get to them soon enough, and they bled to death. But you got to make that decision. That's a decision that I, as a young 27-year-old company commander, made, and I wrestled with that. I still think about that.
Absolutely.
Some people would stop in a heartbeat, everything going on, to bring a chopper in to get 2 people out. So, you know, I just throw that out. I didn't do that. I just kept pressing on and moving on, and we got them out when we could get them out.
It's an impossible position to be in.
Well, it's a tough position, but you know, the adage is the mission first. So you got a great momentum going, and my soldiers pushed, my infantrymen pushed, and I leaned them. I leaned them into the artillery too. I didn't always rescore the artillery. I leaned them into it. They got used to it. Sometimes you got splinters from your own artillery. I don't think I ever had a man killed as a result of my own artillery, but I walked them into it, and that's just the way I operated there. But that knowing when to stop and get your men out was a big decision every young commander had to make out there.
You know, I'm getting way ahead of myself with this question, but it comes up now because of where we're at in the conversation. I'm sure that is one of the toughest things to struggle with like throughout looking back at your full career, is those impossible decisions that were like, I could have gone the other way on that decision. And how do you reconcile that now as a you know, retiree from the Army, and has had the long career that you had, looking back and saying, I can make peace with all of the decisions that I made, or at least most.
Yeah. Well, your first comment was right. It was a tough decision, but you know, you didn't wrestle with it at the exact moment of the fighting. There's just so much going on. I mean, I was bent to keep moving. Once we had the momentum going, we were moving. We were pushing them out of their holes. We were getting them out into the rice paddies where we could bring in the fast movers and bring in the artillery gunships and cut them down. So, but you thought about it afterward. When you got back afterward, first thing they did is, once you got a little cleaned up, the company commanders all met with the brigade XO, and you did an after-action report. And he would ask you, what did you do here? What'd you see there? This and that. And then you sort of thought about it, but at the time, Sean, it's a firefight, infantry fighting. It's just, first of all, it's so noisy. It's so loud. You got men screaming. You got the staccato of the machine gun. And I use my machine guns all the time. You got, you had M60s or the 90 millimeter tank busters that you carried with us. Of course, we didn't have any tanks in opposition, but we used them to break up the VC bunkers or knock down buildings and things like that. But yeah, so anyway, I do bring that out in the book. I had to write about that. Maybe that's one way. Maybe that's one way that I reconcile with those decisions. I do write about it pretty much in the book. Using I'm a pack rat, so I kept a lot of my old after action reports from Vietnam and some of the op orders. So I was able to do a pretty good job in the book on actually recounting facts and specifics.
And that book for everyone is called My Toughest Battle. I did put the link there into the chat. And that's sort of, I mean, what's great is that thinking about our part one conversation and even just the beginning here of part two conversation is this My Toughest Battle. It can speak to so many different things battling along the way of your life. And that's sort of speaking to me now as I'm hearing more of the things that you had to come to terms with.
Yes, right. And of course, as you go through the book, you'll see that my toughest battle has been fighting the after effects of polio.
Right.
And I talk in my book and how I had special shoes and a brace, and I was able to make, thanks to the good Lord, a miraculous recovery, enough to be able to be in the infantry and do what I was able to do. But now, as the doctor, my post-polio doctor, Dr. Asef, says, all that tough grinding on your leg all those years and parachute jumps and things like that, it deteriorated those once reinvigorated horn cells to the point now where I'm on a cane and a brace that goes up under my foot because I have drop foot up to my knee. So my leg is just weaker and weaker. You got to be very careful.
Yeah. I told myself at the beginning of this, I was like, I can't spend too much time on Vietnam, but there's too much story here, and there's too much stuff that we can pull and talk about. But I want to sort of take the step away from Vietnam. But I do have one question real quick, because we do, I think, have some donut dollies in the room. Did you meet any donut dollies while you were in Vietnam?
I never met any. Now, go back a few years before that, I met them in Korea when I had my assignment up in the DMZ for a year with the 1st Cav. We were north of the Imjin, and the donut dollies would come up there, and so I did see them there. But my company, we never had the advantage of seeing them. I mean, those rifle companies in the Delta, we were out all the time. We would come back just long enough to dry out, stand down, get a hot meal, and then go back out again. Now, I know that they did come to Dong Tam, which was headquarters 9th Division, deep in the Mekong Delta a couple times, but I happened to be out on operations, so I never did see them there.
So your DROS was November 1st of 68?
Yes, right, 1st or 2nd, right in there. Yeah, I left Vietnam.
What was it like to leave Vietnam, especially after, I mean, you think back to who you were as you got to Vietnam and everything that sort of happened to you over the course of that time there. What was it like to leave?
Oh my God, it was a wonderful feeling, I will tell you. I mean, it was a wonderful day. Remember, I had a young wife at home with baby. When I left, that baby was 6 months old when I left, so I had 12 months to that. I just couldn't wait to leave and get home. It was a wonderful feeling. Yeah, that's a photograph, folks, in my parents' backyard in Lansdowne, Pennsylvania. They had just gone down to the Philadelphia airport to meet me. I had just come back from Vietnam, so we flew back on charter aircraft, and we flew in our Vietnam, our war khakis, once you got to the Travis Air Force Base, while you changed, and the Army required you to put your greens on at the time, or put greens on, and before you flew into a civilian airport then. So then I flew from San Francisco to Philadelphia. That was a picture of my family right after we met.
Probably a wonderful, amazing day, that just getting
It was
back
an
to your
amazing
family.
day. My mother couldn't believe how skinny I was, and I was very, very thin, tanned, very, very tanned as a result of the hot sun in the Delta.
What would you say was the biggest change in you from your time in Vietnam?
Yeah, well, you know, yeah, that's a good question. That's a question that's often asked. My wife will tell you, and I write her words in the book. She said, "Bill, you were a different person when you came back." Uh, uh, she told me I wasn't as patient, and I'm not. I mean, I was a little more jumpier. I wanted to get things done quickly. I didn't listen as much. Uh, but she was a great Army wife, and she knew what I needed, and that is I needed a bonding with my young son, even though he was only what, just a year or so old.
Mhm.
And so she handed me Billy every minute we were home and got home there. But the big change in me was I wasn't as, you know, as she will tell you, she knew me better than anybody. I just wasn't as patient as I was before I left.
Rick Arisman asked in the chat, how was your reception at the airport?
Yeah, and I discussed that reception because I know, gentlemen, those of you in the audience, you know, you read so much about coming back from Vietnam, and our soldiers were spit on and yelled at, flags in their faces. I'm sure this happened, but you know, it didn't happen to me in November of '68 when we got off that plane. We flew commercial from San Francisco to Philly, and there were a number of Vietnam vets on it who had just come back with me. We got off at Philadelphia, and I remember walking. And at that time, the airlines let the families of the Vietnam vets actually down on the tarmac. You could get down there on the tarmac to meet your Vietnam soldiers. He came off. And so we met there. We walked then through the corridors, and the people just stepped aside and they smiled, and they, you know, it was like thank you, or good to have you back. So I never witnessed the terrible receptions right at the airport that some of our American soldiers did. Let me put it that way. Now I saw it later as you move into the Middlebury chapter at ROTC. Yeah, but I never saw it at the airport. I was welcomed. The people could have been nicer.
We've talked a lot in VBC about PTS or PTSD. Was there a point you may have realized that you suffered from that as well? Did you ever feel like you suffered from it?
I don't think I ever suffered from PTSD. I don't think I did. Some of my men did. Lieutenant Evans, my one platoon leader, he suffered from it all his life, and thank God we stayed in touch. I was able to help him with the VA get the best treatment he could. He was from Alabama, and he just passed away, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. But I don't think I ever had PTS. I mean, I was able to get back and sort of put the war behind me and continue on, and wherever the Army sent me next. I was never seen for PTS or anything like that.
And that leads us to what Brad just put into the chat. When were you sure of making the Army a career after your tour in Vietnam?
Well, you know, I say this in my book. I think I made the decision to make the Army a career before I went to Vietnam. I made that decision. My first tour was with the 82nd. Then they sent me to Korea on the DMZ. It was while I was in Korea where I had some of the best soldiering you could get. I was up in the DMZ where we actually had a live mission there, and that was engaging line crossers as they tunneled under or across the DMZ in Korea. This was '65. And we were drawing fire pay then before they drew fire pay in Vietnam. So I made that decision in Korea that, you know what, I like this. I like the men. I like being with the soldiers. I made my decision there to make a career. And my wife and I were writing, or at that time we were engaged, we were writing, and she knew it at that time that I made that decision. So when I went to Vietnam, I knew I was going to stay in the Army.
When you got back, you were assigned as an ROTC instructor at Middlebury College. Is that correct?
Yes, right. That's correct. So I, and that was something else. There's a chapter in the book on that. This was what, 68, 69, early 70. I was at Middlebury College, Vietnam. Middlebury is a small liberal arts school. It's known as one of the mini or little Ivies in Vermont, up in New England. Where liberalism was festering up there at the time. And yeah, so I went from a hot war over there to the Middlebury campus, where the SDS, I think it was Students for a Democrat Society, they had a chapter in most of the colleges. These were your radical folks who were absolutely against the Vietnam War. Had an absolute dislike, almost hatred for the United States Army. So that was a situation in itself, serving at Middlebury. The best kids we had were the kids in the ROTC program. They were the most balanced on campus, but it got really bad there. I mean, one day I was walking through campus, somebody threw something at me, and we wore our greens every day. And then, of course, 1970, if you recall, May 1970, the terrible Kent State thing happened, where the National Guard killed 4 students rioting. Well, that erupted then across many colleges and campuses around the United States, particularly the small liberal arts schools. What happened to us? The radicals burned the ROTC building down the next night. So that's the kind of stuff I had to cope with there, along with my fellow NCO and officer ROTC guys. And what upset me the most there, what really upset me the most, and I don't pull any punches in the book, is the administration of these colleges. They gave in every goddamn time a student demanded something. They gave in to them. They had no backbone. My PMS was Colonel Hefty, Special Forces guy later on, but he came across the beaches in Normandy. So he and I said, hey, we're going to continue our classes. After the Kent State thing, they shut down all classes at Middlebury. We kept our classes open. The ROTC kept them going, and the ROTC kids came to them. Just a very difficult time, but it was an eye opener for me on really how America, how our universities and campuses were turning against the Vietnam War, were turning against the American soldier. Was very uncomfortable.
With your war experience, what did you try to instill in your cadets in the ROTC?
Well, they were, I had the seniors when I got there, and of course they were just chomping at the bit, because here I'm a guy who'd just been in ground combat in Vietnam, coming back to teach them now. So they really wanted to hear the story. So we had many, other than the formal classroom instruction you had, we had a lot of informal late night sessions with them, which they appreciated. At the time, I was a young major then, maybe 29 years old, and obviously doing what I thought was right. Fighting for the right cause, fighting to rid Vietnam of communism, really. So we talked to the cadets about that, and they by and large felt the same way. But I will tell you, those kids were pulled 2 or 3 different ways. You figure they're right on campus. A lot of their peers are these folks who are totally against the war, pulling them one way, and here we are, the ROTC department, saying you're doing the right thing, you're going to be commissioned shortly. And in fact, we commissioned them in 1970, and a few of them did get over there to Vietnam before we withdrew in 73. Three of them made the Army a career, and I stayed in touch with them through the years. So it was a very tough time, a very tough time on those campuses.
Now, you weren't there too long because of your riverine, your coastal warfare experience. You were assigned then to the Navy Marine Corps in the Pacific.
Yeah, actually, the Army called it a second tour in Vietnam, but I was assigned to the Amphibious Ready Group 3, which steamed up and down the North Vietnamese and South Vietnamese coasts, and actually into the Delta a little bit. If there are any Marines or Navy guys in the audience, they know what an Amphibious Ready Group is. Right? You have 4 ships. And you always carry a Marine Battalion landing team in the well decks, or at times they would shift out and we put an Army infantry team there. And we just steam up and down the coast looking for targets. When you found a target, why you would beach, you would insert a mini amphibious invasion, really. So that's what I did with the Navy Amphibious Marine Force. It was a joint assignment. It's a staff led by an admiral, about 35 Navy officers, 5 Marines, and 1 Army guy. I was the Army guy. Great joint assignment. I was involved in the planning of the amphibious operations, the river operations, and so forth.
Marine Colonel Brad Washabaugh just said, what kind of ships, LSTs or LPHs?
Yeah, so we steamed with 4. Actually, Blue Ridge. USS Blue Ridge, which is still, it's amazing. It's probably the oldest commissioned ship in the Navy, well, other than the Constitution. That was our flagship, an LCC it was. Prior to that, it was USS Paul Revere, which is it's a flagship that's configured with all kinds of communications equipment. And that's the ship where the commander of the amphibious invasion would be. Then with it, we had an LPH, we had the Okinawa, we had an LPD, and at times we had an LST or I forget another configuration. But anyway, we always steamed with 4 ships.
What was it like working with the Marine Corps and the Navy after such a long time with the Army?
Well, that was an eye-opener, really. The Marines sort of took me under their wing because I was a grunt like them, and they gave me the name of the Force Troop. Force Troop. Remember, it was Amphibious Force Pacific Fleet, so they called me the Force Troop. I read about that in the book. But what I enjoyed was the way the Marines and the Navy go at each other. They are both part of the naval service, and they're constantly ribbing each other, and sometimes it got a little sporty. I sort of had to maintain a balance there, you know. But I mean, a lot of good joking and so forth. But you know what, boy, when we got on the beach or when we had liberty, you all pretty much stuck together, and but it was very interesting shipboard duty. I went across the equator and became a shellback, you know, which is something that the Navy does for their sailors. So it was a very interesting time. I enjoyed it very much. My dad had been in the Navy on a minesweeper in the Pacific in World War II. So had there been a Navy ROTC at Gettysburg, I probably would have been in the Navy.
So you went from Amphibious Ready Group to Amphibious Forces specific with like working with SEAL teams and
yeah, that's
UDT
right.
teams.
Yeah, the first year I was at sea, steaming with an ARG, Amphibious Ready Group. And then the second year, they moved me back to Coronado, California, where the Commander Amphibious Forces Pacific Fleet, his name was Vice Admiral Nels Johnson. He was the CO there, and he wanted an Army guy on his staff. because they were starting to then integrate the UDT teams with the SEAL teams, and Navy Special Warfare Group were really starting to really come into the inventory. And so I was on there as a special operations officer, worked very closely with the UDT teams there at Coronado, which later then became the SEAL teams, and the Navy Special Warfare people. And I'll tell you, boy, you talk about doing PT. I would try and do PT with these guys in the morning. They'd start at 6 o'clock on the Strand in Coronado on the beach. Oh my God. I mean, you ran in bathing suits. They would run my ass off, and I managed to hang in there for the run. But when it was over, then they would don their flippers and take maybe a mile swim. That's when I turned around and went back to the locker room, you know? I mean, my leg could not withstand that.
Yeah. How rare was it for an Army personnel to be assigned with them? Was this a special assignment?
Yeah. Yes, it really was. And it was during the Vietnam War when the Navy amphibious ready groups out there, they realized it would be good to have an Army guy on board who had maybe previous riverine experience. So, you know, I was just perfect for that job, having been with the Mobile Riverine Force earlier in Vietnam. And you could help with the planning, and especially when they integrated an Army infantry unit in as part of the amphibious force, which they did more than you might think they did. It wasn't just the Marines. So therefore, you had an Army guy on the staff that could help them with the language and helping with the planning, et cetera. It was really a very, very good move on the part of the Army and the Navy.
We're flashing forward just a touch here, 1975. I know we've talked recently, on our Monday Night Scuttlebutts about the fall of Saigon, this year being the 50th anniversary. What do you remember about that particular day?
The fall of Saigon?
Yeah.
Yeah, April 30th, 1975.
Mm-hmm.
We all have seen that helicopter lifting off the roof of the building, taking people out. Yeah, you know, at the time, I'm not even sure in 75 exactly what I was doing there. I wasn't over there. I was back. No, I was in the Pentagon. Yeah, immersed in the Pentagon, doing things. So I just don't remember a whole lot about it. Of course, I've read about it later and looked at it, and it was I mean, it was something that could have been prevented had we lived up to what we said we would do during the Paris peace talks. And I mean, that's another whole story in itself. But I think we let the South Vietnamese army down. Once we turned the ground fighting over to them, we let them down. We didn't give them the resources. The Congress decided not to give them the resources that were promised them during the Paris peace talks. And, one thing led to the next. And of course, we lost Vietnam.
I was thinking about your family during this time. At what point did your kids start to become aware that you had this career in the Army, and they were sort of Army brats, and they're in the service? And did you ever talk to them about sort of this lifestyle?
Yeah, well, my kids were Army brats from the day they were born. Two of them were born in military hospitals, one at Benning and one at Fort Dix. And then my youngest daughter was born up in Middlebury when we were there. So they were Army brats from the time they were in diapers. My kids, if you would talk to them today, they enjoyed the military. They enjoyed going from post to post, unit to unit. They were all swimmers, so they were on the local swim teams, and usually every Army post had a swim team. So that gave them an immediate thing to move to when they moved. They had something to look forward to, and there was a camaraderie among the other swimmers. So because of the men, my son was in 3 different high schools. So I mean, I often think, could I have handled that when I was back in high school? I know I couldn't. But it made my kids very strong. their coping skills are very, very strong because of that. They assimilate very easily. They engage people very easily. And all three of them did, even coming up as teenagers. And they just enjoyed it. It was, Dad, where are we going to next? Dad, where are we going to next? They were very excited when I got my second tour to Korea, because then they would all go overseas. That was their first overseas assignment with me. So my kids enjoyed the military, and I think are very, very strong as a result of the of moving around and meeting people, coping with different situations.
Colin said, ask about your dog, Soraya?
Soraya, German Shepherd. Yeah, well, yes, we took Soraya to Korea with us, and yeah, that was a trip in itself. It's really funny when we reported to get on the airplane and so forth. The Army realized that we had a dog, and the dog was not in our orders, so they had to scurry around and have Soraya put into the official travel orders there. And once we went through Hawaii, we stayed 24 hours, 48 hours in Hawaii on the way over. I just forget. The dog had to go into quarantine there in one of the kennels by the airport. And then we got back on the airplane for the final trip to Seoul, Kimpo Air Base, I guess it was. We landed. And the Koreans then put the dog in quarantine for 2 weeks. That killed my kids, you know, because they had to run out every day to visit or see the dog. And finally, a dog got out of quarantine and got living with us there in Seoul, Korea. The Koreans were deadly afraid of the dog. But Soraya was a full-bred German Shepherd, but trained very well. And finally took, in Korea, you're very fortunate. I was a colonel in Korea, Lieutenant Colonel. We had a houseboy. It took him about 2 months before he felt comfortable enough about walking the dog. But just another very, very interesting story for a family that made the Army a career and moving a dog around, you know?
Yeah. So this sort of like turns a switch in your career, though, from being in the field to then moving on to the Pentagon, which you mentioned, and sort of how did you make that transition to being the executive secretariat?
Yeah, well, we came back from Korea, and yeah, I eventually went back to the Pentagon for my second tour, and I was assigned as the Deputy Chief of Staff for training. That's when we were working on bringing on these new light infantry divisions, which was a whole new force structure for the Army. And the Army, was General Vono, was Chief of Staff of the Army. He selected me to compete to be the Executive Secretary for the Secretary of Defense, who at the time was Caspar Weinberger, a great man. And each service sends a colonel up there to compete. So Weinberger selected me, and he told me later that he selected me because I was an infantryman. And if you know the story of Caspar Weinberger, he was at Harvard Law School, and when World War II broke out, he joined the Army as a private and fought throughout Indonesia in the infantry. So he had a great affinity for the American soldier, which I liked. So I was selected to be executive secretary, and that was a very interesting job for me as a colonel, to be able to sit there and during some of the key things that were going on then. Reagan was the president. We were rebuilding from those terrible Carter years when he gave away the canal, he gave away our military, et cetera. This is the years of 82 through 89 when Reagan was president. I was executive secretary 87, 88. So it was a good time to be there. And Weinberger left then, and Frank Carlucci came over from the National Security Council, took his job. I would say both of those fine men, both were veterans. Carlucci had served in the Navy, Weinberger in the Army. They would sort of mentor me and bring me along, which I appreciated very much, and just enjoyed them very much. Carlucci promoted me to brigadier general.
Did you have any reservations about moving to the Pentagon?
Well, yeah, I had great reservations. I did not want to go back. I had an earlier Pentagon tour when I came out of the Command and General Staff College. That was what, 73 through 77 then, before I left to take my battalion in the 101st. But this was later on, Sean, then when I went back as a full colonel, and I did not want to go back to the Pentagon. But you go where you're told. And so I went back there for 3 years, 1 year in the training directorate, and then the other 2 years up as executive secretary.
So what were your main responsibilities? What was like a day-to-day for you?
Well, as executive secretary, I ran what they call the small office of the Secretary of Defense. I had about 15 very capable, bright officers working for me. Each service sent 3 or 4. Navy sent 3 or 4, Air Force, Army, Navy. What we did is we oversaw all of the publications, all of the documents and things that left the secretary's office. We wrote the letters for him, drafted letters for him, drafted his monthly reports that would go over to President Reagan. We set up his weekly meetings with Secretary Schultz, who was the Secretary of State, and then Colin Powell, who was the National Security Advisor at the time. We did all that, and the officers that I had working for me there, as I recall, they were all Vietnam vets, different services, very good writers. You had to have very good writing skills. So the services had to make sure that they were sending people up there to the OSD who were pretty good with a pen, and so that's what we did there. I was also in that job as executive secretary. I was the senior military liaison to the White House military office and the White House communications folks. So worked very, very closely with them.
How was working at the Pentagon sort of different than your military time? If you had a staff, could you take some of the responsibilities that you had like in Vietnam with your men and sort of use some of those same skills with the people you were working, that you were in command of at the Pentagon?
Yeah, well, yeah, as I say, at the Pentagon, I had 15 officers working for me. The mission obviously was totally different. I mean, I ran the office of the secretary with those people. It was just a totally different atmosphere. I mean, you're wearing your greens every day. You're not in any combat gear, which I miss. I miss being with the soldiers. It's totally different. And to be honest with you, Sean, I couldn't wait to get the hell out of there, believe me. And and Weinberger knew that when I took the job. I sort of said, sir, I really want to go back to troops. And you know what he said to me? He said, well, I know that. He said, but I need you here now. He said, your time will come later.
Colin said you gave Weinberger a dictionary when he retired?
Yeah. And then when he retired in November, November 87, our little office of the secretary, we presented him with a Random House dictionary. It's one of these 4 or 5 inch thick dictionaries. And it was a great moment in our office when we presented it to him, because Weinberger was very, very quippy, he was quick on his feet, very bright. And he said, well, I guess I'm going to have to pay more attention now to what Random House says, Yeah, it was really funny. And I think there's a photo in the book of that moment.
So if you so wanted to get out of there, why did you end up back there? What was it, because it was orders, or because you decided that you wanted to move?
No, I didn't decide it. The Army wanted to send me back to the Office of the Deputy Chief of Staff for Operations, which is really their plum assignments. But I guess some guys just don't like going back there. But you got to sort of pay your dues, I guess. And that's where they sent me. They sent me back there.
This was after Operation Just Cause and then Desert Shield, Desert Storm?
Yes. Or let's see. No, wait a minute. No, it was not. No. This was before Operation Just Cause. when I left the Pentagon, when I left the Pentagon, when I was promoted to BG, I was promoted out of the job. So my first assignment then was with the 7th Infantry Division out at Fort Ord, one of the Army's new 5 light infantry divisions. I was ecstatic. I was elated about it. And while I was with them is when we went down and got Noriega. That was Operation Just Cause. That was December of 1989.
And what was your involvement? What was your responsibility during that conflict?
Well, I was one of the ADCs. Each infantry division, you got a CG and you got 2 ADCs. I was the assistant division commander for support. So my job, my responsibility was to make sure that our marshaling plan was good, that we could, once the bloom went up and we got the call from the Pentagon to go, that we could get out of there with all of our equipment, all of our ammunition, et cetera. So when we got the call to go, 18 hours wheels up, Air Force starts streaming all kinds of aircraft into both the Monterey Airport and Travis Air Force Base. They were our departure airfields. So yeah, my job was to get all the infantry battalions to those airports, get them on the airplane with all their equipment, and get them out of there. And that's essentially what I did for 2 or 3 days after we got the call. We kicked out 8 infantry battalions in just a matter of a few hours, and we saturated Travis. So we had to take over the local civilian airport at Monterey. They were not happy about that. My boss sent me over there. He said, Bill, get the hell over there and tell them that the U.S. government's taken over. They got to close down. And sure enough, we took it over. So this was right around Christmas now. You can imagine all the Christmas flights, coming in and out, families visiting. We stopped all that, and for 3, 4, or 5 days, used Monterey to send resupply down and to kick out about 3 or 4 of our initial infantry battalions. It was quite an amazing operation. The 7th ID did a wonderful job there, I'll tell you. I have never been associated with an outfit where the planning and the execution went so well. And I will carry that over to say that the in total Operation Just Cause went well for the U.S. Army, or for the U.S. forces. It was a joint operation. Carl Steiner was head of it down there. And, the entire operation, we only lost 23 soldiers, Americans. Of course, losing 1 is bad enough, but so we had 23 killed. 2 were in the 7th ID, had 3 or 4 SEALs killed, 3 or 4 or 5 out of the 82nd, and a couple of the other units. But it was a well-planned operation. Once we got Noriega out of there, then we had to just contend with mopping up the remainder of the PDF. The PDF is the Panama Defense Force, and they were well armed. They were armed with Soviet and Chi-Com weapons, but they didn't put up any fight. I mean, our guys took them down so quick. It was amazing.
Did you work with Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg?
I sure did. Yeah, Keith and I were in the 7th ID together. I was an ADC then, Brigadier General. Keith was 1 grade below. He was a full colonel, and he commanded one of the brigades there. His brigade was the first one down there into Panama. And, his battalions did a great job. Took all their objectives very quickly.
This coalition that did so well during Operation Just Cause, our next conflict was Desert Shield, Desert Storm, correct?
Yes.
And that one is obviously, almost even more famous in terms of the coalition we were able to create for that.
Yes.
Were you involved in that conflict?
Well, I cite in my book, Sean, I was not. I missed that. And I say in my book, I think the way the sentence reads is this is the biggest disappointment I had my 33 years in the Army. I missed that fight. A soldier goes to the sound of the guns. And here, what I think it started, 90, 91, we started building up. It was Desert Shield, then Desert Storm. All my friends were starting to move get ready to go. Their units were being called, the Armored Divisions, the 101st Airborne Division, etc. And here I am. At that time, I was assigned as Deputy Commanding General, U.S. Army Pacific, there at Fort Shafter, Hawaii, on the island of Oahu, sitting comfortably there while the United States Army is getting ready to go to war. And it was upsetting me to no end. I went in to see my boss twice, asking if he would release me to go over there, and he didn't even want to talk about it. So after the second time, I learned not to push him. But you know what? I look back on that, and I look back on that back then. He was right. He was right. There were enough good guys going over there, and I was needed in the Pacific, because what we ended up doing was taking a lot of the stocks, a lot of ammunition out of the Pacific, and sending them over there to General Schwarzkopf on Desert Storm. So that job was given to me as the assistant division, or as the U.S. Army Pacific deputy commander. We also sent a couple small units over to Desert Storm, Desert Shield. We sent a Guamanian MP company. They went over. They did a great job, and sent a couple other combat service support units, all of which I was responsible for getting out there, meeting them, pulling them together, getting them on the airplane, and sending them off. But to this day, I'm upset that I missed that.
Colin put into the chat to ask you about, was it your conflict or a conflict with Norman Schwarzkopf?
Oh yeah. The worst ass chewing I ever got in my life was from the Big Bear. Yeah. I don't know how many of the audience knows about him, but
Brad's shaking his head. So
yeah, but this goes back to my second tour in the Pentagon, Shaw, when I was deputy director for training. Yeah, he was the ADES Ops, a 2-star, and I was a colonel. He called a meeting, and I went to the wrong place. That's because I went where I was told to go. I was told to go the wrong. So I walked in on his meeting after the meeting had started, maybe a minute or so, and I got in there and took my place at the table, and meeting went. And after that, I went back to my office. I got a call from Ron Griffith. At the time, he was the Des Ops. What was he? Executive officer. He said, Bill, he said, Schwarzkopf wants to see you right away. And he says, he's damn mad. Holy Christ. So I'm down on the first floor of the Pentagon. I'm going up the steps to the third floor thinking, what's he want to see me for? What's he mad? I went in the office, and Griffith shut the door behind me and reported to Schwarzkopf. He's huge, sat there at his desk in the middle of the room, and he said, it didn't say, hey, good morning, Colonel Matz, or anything like that. He said, don't you ever be late for another meeting of mine. You embarrassed me, he said. And I started to answer, and he shut me down quick, and that was about the end of the conversation. So, yeah, it was sort of, I went home that night and told Linda, I said, Linda, we may be retiring a little bit earlier than we think, but well, you talk about an ass chewing. It was quick. It was one-sided. Wouldn't let me say anything. He learned later, though, through Ron Griffith, that I was given the wrong room to come to. But I analyze this, and I write about it, maybe a half a page in the book. The man overreacted. I mean, in my view, he just overreacted on a silly meeting. But I was told by a number of people later on who knew General Schwarzkopf real well that he could be that way. He was tough. So anyway, I put that in the book, and because that was, as I say, one of the worst ass chewings I ever had. But it turned out all right, because he was on the promotion board to Brigadier General a couple of months after that. And you know what? He gave me one of the strongest OERs I ever had. So it's funny how things work.
Did you think when you entered the Army that at that point, had you thought like, wow, I never thought I'd make Brigadier General?
Oh my God, I never thought of general. Hey, when Lieutenant Matz came in the Army in January '62, I mean, I saluted anything that walked, you know, and I never thought of it. And when I was captain, major, lieutenant colonel, going up through the field grades, it just never dawned on me. I always managed to stay so busy with my mission, with my job, with my responsibilities, my duties. I didn't let other things bother me, and I never thought 2 or 3 grades ahead. Uh, some I think some of my colleagues, they sort of mapped out things for themselves, and this is where I'll be 3 years from now. If I never thought of that. I took a day at a time and tried to do my job.
I'm going to pause real quick, General, and just ask if you might be able to turn on the light in your room there, as I think it's gotten dark there, and we're all starting to lose you. Feels
Oh,
like
really?
we're having a conversation with a spy.
No, no, we
Yeah,
don't want that.
we can see you now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We don't want that. Let me. I did pay the electric bill, folks. Yeah, we'll give you a little more light. Okay, thank you.
Oh, of course, thank you. So I see the clock. We have like 20 minutes left. Again, we could probably do a part three, a part four, and dive more into different things here. But I kind of want to move forward a bit because you retired in 95, but you're
Yes,
still sort of working, in dangerous zones. You ended up after 9/11, you were working in Saudi Arabia,
yes, right.
and you were in charge of 1,450 men at that point.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I retired in '95. I took a job with Raytheon Company initially, and then while I was working for Raytheon Company, again, it just shows how friendships and mentorships that you develop early in life can help you. Frank Carlucci, who remember was the Secretary of Defense that I worked for,
Mhm.
he at that time was president heading the Carlyle Company, which is a huge international financial company in D.C. He called me one day and he said, Bill, he said, well, no, he asked me to come down for lunch to D.C. and I went down there and he asked me if I would be interested in taking over the Vanell and Northrop Grumman programs in Saudi Arabia. The Carlyle Company had just bought those segments of Northrop Grumman, and that was his contract. And I said, can my wife go? And he said, yes. So sounded exciting. I'd never been to Saudi Arabia. So I took the job. Yeah. And went to Saudi Arabia. And the contract, it's called the SANG contract, Saudi Arabian National Guard Modernization Program, where the U.S. Army helps the Saudi National Guard modernize, helps them with their equipment, introduces new equipment, etc. There's about 1,400, 1,500 men on the contract. Of those, 400 are Saudis. The contract required we hire 400 Saudi nationals, which I was not in favor of, but had nothing to say about that. And the rest of the men were former, mostly Army and Marine enlisted, senior enlisted, and officers were on my contract. The higher ranks in that contract could have their families over there.
And there was a terrorist attack while you were there.
Yep, yep. Well, you all know 9/11. Well, it was shortly after that. I don't know how many might remember the 12th of May, 2003. The 12th of May, 2003, Al Qaeda hit my compound in Saudi Arabia, in Riyadh, killed 10 of my men in their sleep. They hit 11:30 at night. Now, we weren't allowed to have any weapons at all there. In Saudi Arabia, only the Saudis can have a weapon. I didn't like that when I took the job. I asked about that, and they said, no, the Saudis will take care of you. Well, they didn't take care of us that night. The Al Qaeda busted through in a Dodge truck, killed 2 of the guards at the gate, rammed right down the main street within our compound, which was like a little city in itself. behind a 12-foot wall and ran the truck right into my billets where my enlisted soldiers, I call enlisted soldiers, they were my retired guys, were living, and blew the truck up. So all three of them were killed, suicide bomb. And that's what they do. And it was a terrible day, terrible night. I was not on the compound at the time. I was 70 clicks out in the desert. We were doing a training exercise for one of the Saudi brigades, and I got a call from my chief of staff who was back there and said, "Sir, they just hit us." So I had to scurry in there quickly. We drove across the desert at night and got in there. And I guess the bottom line is we had about 90 men in the hospital, various injuries, wounds, 10 dead. And Colin Powell, the Secretary of State, was over in the Middle East area at the time. And he was right there close to Saudi. And of course, when he got the word, they landed in Riyadh, and he came out the next day and saw me. And I really needed that boost. I mean, I felt terrible. I'm responsible for those men and for that compound and that program. Yet I wasn't there that night when they hit and killed 10 of my men. I had no weapons, no arms to fight back. Terrible moment.
How was that, I'd say, different than being in charge of men or men that were killed in action in Vietnam?
Well, I mean, the biggest difference in Vietnam, you know your mission. Your mission is to go out there and kill the enemy, and you were well armed and could do it. There we're under the protection of the Saudi guards who were outside the compound. I wasn't even allowed to have a single weapon. None of my men were, and you felt helpless. I describe it as best I can in my book, but you just feel helpless about it. It was a very, 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 very tough time, very tough thing. We did rebuild though. We did totally rebuild the program. A lot of the men quit then, and I don't blame them. A lot of the men quit and went back, and but we did rebuild. We got another compound and kept the program going, and we were able to finally convince the Saudis, the Crown Prince, that we needed weapons. And Northrop Grumman and Vanel fought for that, and we ended up having weapons on our new compound.
One step back from Saudi Arabia, since you had retired in 95, when 9/11 happened, did you think about going back in?
Back in the service?
Yeah.
No, Sean. No, I didn't. I don't believe so. And I mean, they weren't. Our government wasn't thinking of recalling people. I don't think at the time. No.
After Saudi Arabia, you made your way back to the States. Sort of what did you do once you got back?
Yeah, when I got back to the States, I was going to retire, but a good friend of mine who had retired from the 82nd Airborne Division, George Landis, called me and he said, "Hey, Bill, there's a great National Veterans Association that's looking for a president, and you'd be a great fit." So one thing led to the next. I took the interview with him and got the job. So I was president of the National Association for Uniformed Services for 6 years, Sean. And that was during the period of 2005 to about 2011. That was during the Bush and Obama years. And we worked very hard on veterans benefits, on the TRICARE program, TRICARE for Life program. But my association worked very hard with Senator, trying to think of his name, the Virginia senator. I can't think of his name right now, but he's the one who introduced
Warner.
the new GI Bill for the Afghan Iraqi war veterans. So my association got behind that very quickly. It was Senator Webb. got behind that. We worked very hard. We helped them draft the language for that bill, and we got it passed. Obama signed it in 2008, and I feel so good about that because these kids who fought in Iraq and Afghanistan now have that same GI Bill, even better than what my father and my dad's generation had when he came back from World War II.
I want to pull up a picture, and I know that here at VBC we don't ever really talk politics, but just to give you everyone here an idea of the administrations that you worked with over the years, who's you with Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush,
Yeah,
Obama, McCain, Trump, probably first and second, not second term, but both first term.
right. And that picture with Obama, that was right before he signed the bill, and he had me in for just a couple minute quick discussion talk, and thanked our association for the leadership that we gave the Congress in pulling that bill together. He was very proud of that bill.
So why didn't you ever go into politics yourself?
No, I could never do that. I would last a day. No, I
Um,
never thought of it.
But
Never.
what was it like? I mean, all of these years, all this experience in the military, even count into your retirement, coming back, working on that new GI Bill, like sort of working through the system and always, I'd say, serving and trying to make life better for veterans around you. Was that just sort of a personal mission that you wanted to do?
It's they were duties, they were jobs that I enjoyed. I guess you go back to I just said I loved being with the soldiers, loved being with the infantry. That's why I hated it whenever I had a job at some high level staff like U.S. Army Pacific or like the Pentagon. I missed being with the operational units. Probably goes back to my very first tour with the 82nd when the 82nd is America's fire brigade. Anything that happens, that's the 9/11 call. They get alerted. And we talked about that during my earlier session. And I just enjoyed that. And I enjoy being in the fray. And as long as my health holds out, yeah, I had some wonderful jobs. And some of the people who met me and mentored me early on, we stayed in touch. And I think that's important in life. And they offered me some good jobs, later on. So it worked out real good. I enjoyed my job with President Trump. I don't know if you're going to get into that now,
Well, I
Sean.
wanted to talk about the American Battle Monuments Commission and sort of your work with that, and if that was within that particular his administration.
Yes, right. So I was secretary of the American Battle Monuments Commission, and that was during the first Trump administration. It's an appointed position. I was appointed by President Trump. He didn't know me from Adam, and I certainly didn't know him. But again, you mentioned Keith Kellogg earlier. Kellogg was on the transition team of the first Trump administration. So when Trump was elected in 2016 now, he called me up one day. I'm sitting quietly at home, and he says, Bill, this is Keith Kellogg. Would you be interested in working in the Trump administration? It's really funny. It's a funny story. It's in the book, but the phone was on speaker and my wife was sitting there and she said, oh yeah, of course he would. I was in her space, you know what I mean? So you men out there, you know how we can get in the ladies' space. So I said, no, I would be. And one thing led to the next. They wanted to put me over in the VA or in the Defense Department. I didn't want to go back to Pentagon. So the American Battle Monuments Commission was open and he selected me for that. And I was appointed to that as secretary and kept that until the Biden administration came in 2021. That I did not see that as a job. I mean, that's a duty. That was a duty. It was a real honor to take that position. That's America's premier commemorative position. It oversees 26 American cemeteries, 32 battle monuments in 17 countries on 5 continents. So, Sean, I was on the road a lot, as you can imagine.
Mm-hmm. What were your personal responsibilities in heading up that commission?
Yeah, well, I was the secretary. I was sort of like, I guess, equivalent to a COO. I ran and managed the staff, and I ran and managed the overall agency, and was responsible for everything it did or didn't do. All those cemeteries were under me. Our headquarters was in Arlington, but I didn't believe staying there. I thought you get out of your foxhole and go out where the troops are. So I was on the road a lot, visiting those superintendents who were running the cemeteries. All the superintendents must be U.S., but the other people that work there are people indigenous to that particular country, and of course, where the cemetery or the battle monument is. Of course, our flagship cemetery is Normandy, sits right above the beaches of Omaha, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners have been to Normandy. If not, they certainly know about it. So I was responsible for that cemetery along with the other 26, and I was out often, and yeah, it just clearly kept me busy. But what an honor to be able to have that duty.
Brad brought up a good question, was what were some of the challenges with that job?
Uh, well, one of the challenges for me was just just the personal challenge, knowing that all of those sites you were responsible for were thousands of miles away in different countries, so you had to get there. So constantly, I lived out of my suitcase. I lived out of an airplane. On some occasions, my wife could go with me, but most not. So that was a challenge in itself, trying to get to see everything. And I did get to all 26 cemeteries, some multiple times. And I never got to all 32 battle monuments, but I got to about 26 or 27 of them. Like, we've got one battle monument, is the surrender tree in Cuba, where we took the surrender from the Spanish-American War. Tried to get to Cuba, but the Cuban government wouldn't give us a visa. I couldn't get down there. We've also got one on the island of Saipan for the Marines. I couldn't get out there. It's tough to get to Saipan. Now, had Trump won the election and I stayed on another 4 years, which was going to happen, well, I would have then gotten to everything. Mm-hmm. But that was really the biggest challenge. The other challenge that I think anybody has, is getting good people to work for you and keep them. That's always a challenge. But what a wonderful duty, though.
I so appreciate the time that I've got to spend with you and learn so much from you, and learn about your service. And I something that kind of popped in my head as I was sort of making all of my questions for you was looking at the long history of serving America, serving this country. My question is what is your kind of ideal of America? You spend your entire life committed to the ideal of who we are, or what our country means. And I kind of came up with that as I was sort of writing questions and thinking about, like, for someone who has committed so much of their life to it, what was that ideal to you?
Yeah, you got me there. The ideal of America to me was formulated in my mind when I was a political science major at Gettysburg College, 19 years old. My ideal of America is what the founding fathers wrote out for us. The greatest piece of paper, the greatest governing document the world's ever seen, is our Constitution, the values of that Constitution, and what our founding fathers did and went through, and the way they put our government together, which is being tested, often tested by almost every administration. That's where my set of ideals came about, and I never tarried from that.
And one final question here is, how much, in writing your book, My Toughest Battle, again, we have the link there in the chat. How much of your career sort of came back to you as you decided to go back and write your memoir, write everything that you had been through? Were there things that sort of popped up like, oh my goodness, I forgot that I did that?
Yeah. Very good question, because I sat and penned this out myself. I mean, just shows how old fashioned I am, but I used pencils. on stenographer paper, and I wrote everything out, would give it to my good wife. She'd put it on our Apple desk computer, this the one I'm speaking in front of right now. She'd double space type it, give it back to me, and I'd re-edit it, and then send it to my editor, Colin Heaton, who I think is in the audience this evening, and he would go through it along with another editor that he introduced me to, Marilyn. I think you folks know her, and they would go through and tighten it up for me, etc. But yeah, as I was writing, things did pop up. They did. And I remembered this and I remembered that. Or my wife would say, Bill, you know, you should include this or you should include that. And then after it was all over, though, too, and it goes to the publisher, and you can't make any changes, you know, you think of one or two other things. But let me tell you this, though. I don't know if you've ever written a book. This was the first book I ever wrote, and it's the last one I'll ever write. But my publisher made me whittle my manuscript down. I had to knock out almost 70 or 80 pages because you're on a tight page count and a word count. So I had to get down to that before they would write a contract for me. And it's awfully hard because this is your story, you know, and you think this is the greatest thing. You spent 3 years writing the damn thing, and then some publisher tells you you got to cut it down, sir. And you know they were right though. And so this is where Colin and Marilyn helped me whittle out stuff that was hard for me to take out, you know. But I cite the audience that because there's about another 70 pages that thankfully we saved you from that, but they were taken out of the book.
Maybe an excerpt. We could run it on VBC. You hear that, Colin? Maybe we could take those and run them in our blog. We've reached time, General. Again, I want to thank you so much for the time that you've spent with us, with our audience, through 2 interviews. It's been a pleasure and an honor to have you and have your time.
Yeah, well, thank you, Sean. No, thank you, and I thank the folks who are in attendance, and thank you very much. I've got a few minutes. I'll take any if there's any a postscript or any questions.
Any questions here in the chat? Let me pop over to my other view if anybody wants to wave their hand here. I also saw Marilyn. I'll ask you to unmute, and Colin. And how was it working with General Matz on his book?
I loved it. I've edited quite a few books, and I have to say his was right up at the top.
Hello, Marilyn.
Hi, Bill.
Yeah.
You reminded me of cutting all the extra words. That was pretty painful, but that certainly showed your patience. You said you lost coming back from Vietnam because you were patient with me, you were patient with Colin, and we both really like working with you. And as I heard you speak tonight, it reminded me of the coincidences we had. I was also at the Pentagon. I was also at 3 high schools in 4 years as an Air Force brat, though.
There you go.
And my husband was first cav in Korea. So the more we all worked together, we found that we had quite a bit in common. And Colin and I were always in close touch, and throughout the whole thing, just really admired the whole work, what you did, how you did it, how well written it was. And it was a joy to work. It really was.
Well,
yeah, it was pretty, yeah, because the thing was that it took 3 years for us to get that book done. But I can, and General Matz once asked me, he goes, Colin, how are you dealing with all this? And I'm like, hey, at least you're not General Livingston, man, because that was painful.
But you had the footnotes too, Colin.
Yeah.
Oh, man, yeah.
And computer problems with footnotes.
Yeah, but for the audience, your 2 colleagues, Marilyn and Colin, who just spoke, and oh my God, hopefully I acknowledged them in the right way under my acknowledgement pages in the book, but they were wonderful, absolutely wonderful. Couldn't have done it without you, and I appreciate it very much.
A couple more questions. I've Al, Bob, and Betty. Betty, I see your hand raised. Betty, would you like to go first?
I was wondering how old he was when he got sick, and how long it took him to get over.
Yeah, Betty, you mean when I had polio?
Polio, yeah.
Yeah, well, I contracted polio I was not quite 6 years old in 1944, and I was in and out of hospitals in either an outpatient or an inpatient status up until my official release from the polio paralysis program, which was 1953. So what would that be? That'd be a total of 9 years. Yeah. I was in and out of braces, in and out of hospitals, etc.
Yeah, I lived next door to another child who had polio, and these were times when we were terribly scared of what you survived and have lived well with.
Yeah, yeah. I'll tell you, every mother in the 40s and 50s, even up into the 60s until Salk and Sabin came along with their vaccines, every mother just feared their child coming down with polio and feared the crippling that the disease would do.
So I'm glad you survived and have thrived through all these years.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Bob Fleisch?
Yes, sir. Excellent presentation, General. Do you have any fond memories of the USS Benawa?
Oh my God, yeah. Were you on it?
Yes, Echo 3rd of the 60th. Every time we went out with the 2 battalions, we always got to go to the Benawa.
Yeah. Well, you were a sister battalion in the Mobile River Rain Brigade. Okay, you were 3rd of the 60th. Yeah, no, I have fond memories of the Benawa, which was a barrack ship. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, we were there 67, 68.
Same time I was.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, thank you for listening.
Oh, it brings back a lot of memories.
Happy to make the connection there, Bob. Thank you for chiming in with that. Al Smith, you had a question earlier in the chat.
Yeah, General, hate to end this wonderful session with you in a little bit of a downer question, but I put in the chat that when surveys are taken today of Americans and they say, describe America, the one word that comes up more than ever is divided. As veterans who are so proud of our country, so united with patriotism, it tears my guts out when I think where our country is and how we change that. Well, it's got to be alarming to you too, I'm sure.
It tears my heart out. Exactly, just like you say. No, you're absolutely right. You know, I think we've been a divided country now through the last couple of administrations. I'm not casting any aspersions, but in my view, it all started with Obama administration. And it's just carried on. Yeah, I mean, it's terrible. You know, if you read my book, I wrote a two-page afterward, the last couple pages of the book. My publisher did not want me to write that. They said it would detract from my wonderful story, quote. But I said, no, I want it, because I wrote the afterward because I wanted to put in context for the reader what it was like when I was growing up versus what it is now. And so, yeah, this divided stuff bothers you. People say diversity is the strength of America. No, it's not. The strength of America is oneness. We all came together as one, that melting pot. That strength is what won World War I, World War II, etc. And so you've had administrations get in there that rip that apart. And they set this group off against this group and that group. And it's terrible. And you know, once you are divided, I saw this even in the military, in little cliques in the military sometimes. It's very hard to come together again as a one nation. But I have faith that we will someday. I probably won't be around, but what goes around comes around. And frankly, I'm very happy President Trump is back in there. We need a tough guy like him right now, a guy that absolutely loves America. And hopefully he and the people that he's put in these cabinet offices can help bring us back together. But one other point on that too. So I was speaking to a George Washington group the other day about my book. And these are all young kids and they're all very interested. The other thing that bothers me as a soldier is something like 70% of America's youth are not fit to serve in our armed forces today. Doesn't that bother you? I went back and checked it when I was growing up, it was like 30% maybe weren't fit. You know, if you had asthma or something like that. But I mean, for 70%, that's because these kids have some kind of a drug background. They've got tattoos in the wrong place. They're obese. It just bothers you. If we ever had a national emergency and really had to reinvigorate our militaries, I think we would be in a tough, in a tough position, because I certainly don't want the military to lower the standards. And I don't think you do either. But to me, that's a national issue.
Well, thank you again, General Matz. Thank you again for your time and for your wisdom. And for everyone here, Thursday night we are off. Glenn's off for the next 2 weeks. He'll be traveling. So we will be back next Monday. I'll be hosting next Monday with Father Phil Salwa, who was also a Vietnam veteran, went through a pretty gnarly battle, made a promise to God during that battle that he would do whatever he could if God saw him through that battle, and he joined the missionary seminary after his time in Vietnam. A famous story, but we're looking forward to having him on next Monday night. To everyone here, thank you so much for joining us tonight, and we're looking forward to having, I think Todd will be back next Monday, so we could say hi to him and find out how the trip went down to New Orleans. General, please feel free to join us anytime that you're available and you'd like to chime in or just listen in. We'd love to have you.
Oh, no, thank you. Thank you again, Sean.
Thank you all. You all have a wonderful